Welcome to Hearths of Myths. Tonight, we turn our gaze away from the fertile green valleys and the life-giving waters that usually define the stories of the ancient world. We turn our backs on the harvest, on the rhythmic rising of the river, and on the safety of the city walls. Instead, we look to the horizon, where the sun beats down with an intensity that bleaches the bone and cracks the stone. We look to the vast, shimmering expanse of the Deshret, the Red Land. Close your eyes. Let the cool air of your room fade away, and replace it with the dry, static heat of the deep desert. Here, the wind does not rustle leaves. It scours the earth. It is a sound of friction, of sand grains colliding with the force of microscopic diamonds, eroding the monuments of kings and the footprints of travelers alike. This is a place where silence is heavy, a tangible weight that presses against the ears, broken only by the sudden, violent howl of the storm. It is a landscape of extremes, of stark beauty and terrifying emptiness. And it is here, in this unforgiving crucible, that we find one of the most complex, misunderstood, and powerful figures in all of human mythology. We are walking the path of the Red God, the Lord of Storms, the Separator, the one of great strength, Seth. To understand Seth, we must first unlearn the simplistic definitions of evil that modern storytelling often imposes on ancient deities. In the cosmology of the Nile, duality was not a war between absolute good and absolute evil. It was a delicate, necessary tension between order and chaos, between the static perfection of Ma'at and the dynamic, disruptive force of Isfet. Seth is not the devil. He is not a fallen angel. He is something far more primal and far more essential. He is the force that tests the boundaries. He is the violence of the storm that clears the stagnant air. He is the strength of the iron that cuts, the power of the thunder that shakes the foundations of the heavens. He is the outcast who stands on the prow of the sunboat to defend the light when all other gods are paralyzed by fear. But before he was the defender, and long before he was the murderer, he was a brother. His story begins in the dawn of time, in the great silence before the world had taken its final shape. To find his origins, we must look to the Ennead of Heliopolis, the great family tree of creation that explained how the universe unfolded from the primordial waters of Nun. In the beginning, there was only the dark, watery abyss. From this void rose Atum, the self-created one, the first point of light and consciousness. Atum was alone, a singular existence in a sea of nothingness. Through his own will, through the power of his breath and his seed, he generated the first pair of elements, Shu, the dry air, and Tefnut, the moist, corrosive order. These two forces, air and moisture, drifted in the void until they gave birth to the next generation, Geb and Nut. Geb was the earth, the solid ground, the reclining god whose laughter caused earthquakes and whose body was covered in the vegetation of the world. Nut was the sky, the vast, star-studded arch that stretched over him. In the ancient days, earth and sky were locked in a perpetual, crushing embrace. There was no space between them, no room for air to circulate or for life to flourish. They were lovers, fused together in the darkness. It was their father, Shu, the air, who was commanded to separate them. Imagine the titan force of the atmosphere pushing upward, heaving the body of the sky goddess away from the earth god. Shu stood on the chest of Geb and lifted Nut high above his head, creating the atmosphere, the bubble of life in which humanity and the gods could exist. But Nut was already pregnant. Within her womb, the sky goddess carried 5 children. These were not merely infants. They were the archetypes of existence, the forces that would govern the human experience. There was Osiris, the golden child, the embodiment of fertility, kingship, and the cyclical resurrection of nature. There was Isis, the great magician, the essence of wisdom, motherhood, and the cohesive power of love. There was Nephthys, the lady of the house, the shadow sister, representing the margins and the hidden things. There was Horus the elder, the distant falcon of the high sky. And then there was Seth. The birth of these gods is recorded in the pyramid texts, the oldest religious writings in the world, carved into the stone walls of the royal tombs at Saqqara. These texts do not speak of Seth with the reverence of peace. They speak of him with the awe of catastrophe. The myth tells us that Osiris was born first. His birth was natural, a smooth passage into the world, accompanied by a voice that boomed across the cosmos proclaiming, "The Lord of all has come forth." Osiris was the perfection of the cycle. He was the water that flows, the seed that sprouts. He followed the path laid out for him. Seth, however, was different from the very moment of conception. In the darkness of the womb, Seth refused to wait. He refused the order of birth. He refused the canal that nature had provided. The pyramid texts describe his birth as an act of violent autonomy. Utterance 222 states that Seth did not come forth in the manner of his siblings. Instead, he tore himself free. He ripped through the side of his mother, Nut. He burst into the world through a wound of his own making, a violent, bloody entry that defied the laws of biology and the expectations of the gods. This singular act defines his entire existence. Seth is the god who breaks the vessel. He is the force that refuses to be contained by boundaries, canals, or wombs. While Osiris flows like water, Seth strikes like iron. His birth was not an arrival. It was an explosion. It is said that the sky turned the color of bruised copper, and the first thunderclap ever heard rattled the teeth of the mountains. He was born screaming, a sound that was not a cry for help, but a challenge to the silence. He was born with red hair, the color of the desert sand at sunset, the color of blood, the color of fire. In ancient Egypt, redness was a complex symbol. It represented anger and danger, yes, but it also represented life, victory, and potent masculinity. Seth was the red god, the lord of the Deshret, while his brother Osiris was destined to rule the black, fertile soil of the Nile Valley, the Kemet. Seth was given dominion over the vast, sterile wastes that surrounded it. He was the god of the outside. Look at him now, as the ancient artists depicted him. He stands tall, his body lean and muscular, vibrating with a tense, coiled energy. But it is his head that draws the eye and confuses the mind. The other gods are easily identified by the animals they represent. Anubis is the jackal, Horus is the falcon, Sekhmet is the lioness, Sobek is the crocodile. We know these animals. We can see them in the zoo or in the wild. But Seth is different. He possesses the head of an animal that does not exist in the known biological record. Egyptologists and zoologists have spent centuries arguing over the identity of the Seth animal, or the Shah. Some have suggested it is an aardvark, an anteater, a greyhound, a fennec fox, or even a stylized giraffe, but none of these fit perfectly. The snout is too long and curved, drooping slightly downward like a trumpet. The eyes are small, high-set, and piercing. The ears are the most distinctive feature. They are tall, rectangular, and stand stiffly upright, flat on the tops as if they have been cropped. And the tail stands straight up, stiff and rigid, ending in a peculiar forked tassel like an arrow or the fletching of a dart. This animal is a chimera. It is a biological impossibility, and that is precisely the point. The ancient Egyptians were master observers of nature. They could carve a goose or a gazelle with photorealistic precision. If they drew the Seth animal this way, it was because it was meant to be unrecognizable. It represents a creature that is not of this natural order. It is a beast of the imaginary, a monster from the twilight realm of chaos that has stepped into the world of form. The Shah is the embodiment of otherness. It is the thing that cannot be categorized, the anomaly in the system. When the Egyptians looked at Seth, they saw a god who defied the taxonomy of creation. In the early days, before the tragedies that would tear the family apart, Seth lived in the Red Land. Imagine his realm. It is a place of absolute purity in its destruction. There is no mud here to muddy the boots. There is only wind-swept purity. It is the land of minerals, of precious stones hidden deep in the rock, of gold veins running like frozen fire through the quartz. Seth is the lord of metals. The iron found in meteorites, the metal of heaven, was known as the bones of Seth. It was hard, magnetic, and came from the sky, just as his thunder did. He wandered these wastes, hunting. He was the greatest of hunters, the master of the chase. While Osiris taught men to farm and to store grain in silos, Seth taught them the spear and the bow. He taught them to respect the wild forces that could not be tamed. He was the patron of those who lived on the edge, the caravan drivers crossing the dunes, the soldiers marching into foreign lands, the explorers who dared to go beyond the safety of the river. He was not alone, though he was often lonely. The Ennead had paired the siblings. Osiris was wed to Isis, a union of perfect symmetry, earth and magic, king and queen. Seth was wed to Nephthys. Nephthys is a goddess of profound subtlety. Her name, Nebet-Hut, means Lady of the House, or Mistress of the Enclosure. She represents the perimeter, the fence, the boundary line between the temple and the wilderness. She is the twilight to Isis's day. It was a strange match. The god of the chaotic, boundless desert married to the goddess of boundaries and enclosures, and it was a marriage marked by a profound and tragic silence. The myths tell us that their union was barren. There were no children born of Seth and Nephthys. In the agricultural symbolism of Egypt, this made perfect sense. Osiris, the fertile flood, and Isis, the rich earth, produced Horus, the crops. But Seth, the desert, and Nephthys, the edge of the field, could produce nothing. The desert cannot be farmed. It is sterile. This sterility was a source of deep, festering pain for the red god. It was not just a biological failure. It was a metaphysical one. In a culture that obsessed over lineage, creation, and the continuation of life, Seth was the end of the line. He was the cul-de-sac of the cosmos. Yet, in this primordial era, Seth was still a beloved member of the divine family. He was the beloved of Ra. The sun god, Ra, recognized something in Seth that the other gods lacked. Ra saw raw power. The Egyptians called it Sekhem, while the other gods had Heka, magic, or Ma'at, order. Seth had Sekhem, pure, unadulterated physical force. Ra needed this force. Every day, the sun god traveled across the sky in his solar bark, the Manjet. It was a journey of glory, illuminating the world. But every night, the boat dipped below the western horizon and entered the Duat, the terrifying underworld of 12 hours of darkness. There, the waters turned to fire, and the enemies of creation waited in the shadows. The greatest of these enemies was Apophis, the great serpent of chaos, the uncreator. Apophis sought to swallow the sun, to hypnotize the crew of the boat, and to return the universe to the primordial sludge of non-existence. The other gods, even the wise Thoth and the magical Isis, were susceptible to the hypnotic gaze of the serpent. They would freeze in terror. But not Seth. Seth, the monster of the desert, the violent one, the one with the strange iron bones, was immune to the terror of chaos because he carried a piece of chaos within himself. He stood at the prow of the solar barge, spear in hand. He was the bodyguard of the light. When Apophis rose from the abyss, hissing words of negation, it was Seth who screamed back. The roar of the Seth animal was the only sound capable of drowning out the hiss of the serpent. Seth was the necessary evil that fought the absolute evil. He was the controlled fire used to fight the wildfire. So, picture him in these early eons. He is powerful, respected, and feared. He is the uncle of the gods, strong of arm and swift of foot. He is the one you call when the monsters knock at the door. But beneath this armor of strength, a seed of darkness was beginning to germinate. It began with a look, a glance across the border. From his high, rocky plateaus in the desert, Seth could look down into the valley. He could see the black, rich earth of his brother's kingdom. He could see the green stalks of wheat swaying in the gentle breeze. He could see the people singing songs of praise to Osiris, the benevolent king, the Lord of life, the beautiful being. He could see the love in the eyes of Isis as she looked at her husband. He could see the adoration of the cosmos directed at the Golden One. In the desert, there was no adoration. There was only the wind. There was only the sun that burned and the sand that scraped. Seth had the strength. He had the power. He had the duty of protecting the sun. But he did not have the love. He did not have the fertility. He was the sterile king of a dead land. This envy was not a petty human emotion. It was a cosmic imbalance. It was the friction between the static and the dynamic. Osiris represented stability, cycles, and growth. Seth represented entropy, change, and force. These two forces cannot coexist peacefully forever. One must eventually try to consume the other. The pyramid texts hint at this growing tension. There are whispers of skirmishes, of arguments in the court of the gods. Seth began to feel that his allocation was unfair. Why should the strong one, the defender of Ra, be relegated to the wasteland? Why should the soft, passive Osiris rule the hearts of men? And then there is the matter of the seed. The ancient texts are explicit about the sexual potency of the gods. Osiris was potent. His seed created life. Seth's sexuality was different. It was aggressive, undirected, and often described as confused or barren. There are myths that suggest Nephthys, desperate for a child, tricked Osiris. She disguised herself as her sister Isis, smelling of the same perfumes, wearing the same linen. In the darkness, Osiris mistook the Lady of the Edge for the Queen of the Earth. He lay with her. From this illicit union of the green land and the boundary, a child was conceived, a jackal-headed child. Anubis, the god of mummification, who walks between the worlds. Seth discovered the infidelity. He discovered that even his own wife, the boundary of his own desert, had turned inward toward the fertile valley. The humiliation was total. His sterility was mocked by his brother's overflowing vitality. The desert had been betrayed by the sown land. The atmosphere in the red land changed. The wind grew sharper. The storms became more violent, whipping up sandstorms that blotted out the sun for days. The Shah animal howled in the canyons, a sound of ragged grief and fury. The iron of Seth began to harden in his heart. He realized that the separation of roles decreed by the Ennead, Osiris as the king of the living, Seth as the king of the outside, was no longer acceptable. If the universe would not give him the respect he deserved, he would take it. If he could not create life, he would introduce something new to the world, something that had never existed before in the Golden Age of the gods. He would introduce death. But a god cannot be killed easily. Osiris was the essence of life itself. To destroy life, Seth needed a plan of intricate cunning. He needed to turn his chaotic mind toward a cold, calculated architecture of murder. He began to gather allies. He did not go to the gods of the high heaven. He went to the lesser spirits, the conspirators, the beings of the Ethiopian shadows, who also felt excluded from the light of Osiris's reign. He found 72 accomplices, 72 beings willing to break the Ma'at, and he began to build, not a temple, not a pyramid, but a box, a chest made of the finest cedar wood from Byblos, smelling of resin and doom. He inlaid it with ivory, ebony, and gold. He carved it with spells and beautiful images. It was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, the most beautiful object ever created. But its beauty was a trap. Seth had measured the shadow of his brother. He had obtained the exact dimensions of Osiris's body while he slept. The chest was built to fit only one being in the entire cosmos. The stage was set. The invitation was written. The primordial outcast, the wild brother of the desert, was about to host a banquet. He would invite the king. He would invite the court. He would smile with the square-eared face of the Shah, and he would offer a gift that would shatter the Golden Age forever. As the sun sets over the red land, casting long, bloody shadows across the dunes, we can feel the shift in the air. The era of innocence is ending. The beast of chaos has stopped howling. He is quiet now. He is waiting. The coffin is ready, and the first murder is about to begin. We have witnessed the violent birth of the Red God. We have looked into the strange face of the Seth animal, and we have felt the heat of the desert that forged his iron soul. We have seen the cosmic necessity of his strength and the tragic seed of his envy. But the storm is only just gathering. We will walk into the banquet hall of doom. We will witness the great conspiracy of the 72. We will hear the heavy lid of the chest slam shut, a sound that echoes through eternity as the first coffin is sealed. We will follow the grieving Isis as she searches for the body of her husband, and we will see Seth rise not just as a jealous brother, but as the usurper king who plunges the world into darkness. The silence of the desert is broken. The thunder is rolling in. This is the story of the first murder. This is the story of how death entered the world. To understand the magnitude of this crime, we must first immerse ourselves in the atmosphere of the world before it happened. The reign of Osiris was known as the Golden Age. The Egyptians called it Zep Tepi, the first time. Under Osiris's rule, the Nile flooded with perfect regularity. The crops grew high and thick. The granaries were bursting with wheat and barley, and the laws of Ma'at, truth, justice, and cosmic order, were observed without question. There was no war. There was no hunger. There was no disease. It was a paradise of static perfection. But to a god like Seth, paradise is a prison. Seth is the lord of storms. He is the dynamic force of change. For him, a world without conflict, without struggle, without the harsh reality of the desert, is a world that is slowly rotting. He looked at his brother's kingdom, and he did not see perfection. He saw stagnation. He saw a people who were becoming soft, a cosmos that was becoming complacent, and in his own heart, the bitterness of his isolation was growing like a cancer. The ancient texts, particularly the accounts preserved by the Greek writer Plutarch, who drew upon much older Egyptian oral traditions, give us the details of the conspiracy. It was not a sudden act of passion. It was a cold, calculated, architectural project. Seth did not act alone. He knew that to overthrow the king of the living, he needed allies who also felt marginalized by the blinding light of Osiris. He went into the shadows. He whispered in the corners of the divine court. He found 72 conspirators. The number 72 is significant in ancient numerology. It represents a comprehensive circle of descent, perhaps linked to the movements of the stars or the deacons of the sky, suggesting that the heavens themselves were turning against the static rule of Osiris. Among these conspirators was a mysterious figure named Queen Aso of Ethiopia. Her presence is crucial. She represents the foreign, the lands south of Egypt, the Nubian territories that were often associated with exotic magic and danger. By allying with her, Seth was gathering the forces of the other, uniting the desert and the foreign lands against the Central Valley. Together, they devised a plan that required no swords and no armies. It required only a measurement. The myth tells us that Seth, with the cunning of a thief, managed to obtain the exact measurements of Osiris's body. Perhaps he did it while his brother slept, creeping into the royal bedchamber with a measuring reed, noting the length of the spine, the width of the shoulders, the span of the hips. Or perhaps he estimated it from the king's shadow cast upon the palace wall. However he did it, he took those numbers to the greatest craftsman in the universe. He commissioned a chest. Imagine this object. It was made of the finest cedar wood imported from Byblos, a wood that was prized for its scent and its durability. It was the wood of temples and of ships. The carpenters smoothed the planks until they were like silk. They inlaid the wood with ebony, ivory, lapis lazuli, and gold. They carved intricate hieroglyphs into the sides, spells of protection and beauty, scenes of the gods at play. It was, without a doubt, the most magnificent piece of furniture ever created. It gleamed in the light. It smelled of the deep forest and expensive resin. But inside, it was a tomb. Its interior dimensions were cut to the millimeter, to fit only one being in all of creation. It was a glove, waiting for a hand. Once the chest was finished, Seth announced a great banquet. He invited the Ennead. He invited the courtiers. And, with a smile that showed too many teeth, he invited his brother, King Osiris. The banquet was held in a great hall, likely in the city of Memphis, or perhaps in Seth's own stronghold. The atmosphere was festive. The beer flowed like the Nile flood. Musicians played harps and flutes. Dancers spun in linen robes. The conspirators, the 72 dark spirits, mingled with the guests, their eyes darting back and forth, waiting for the signal. Osiris arrived. He was radiant. He wore the Atef crown, the white crown flanked by ostrich feathers. His skin was green, symbolizing the vegetation and the resurrection of life. He was trusting. Why shouldn't he be? He was the good God. Who would want to harm the source of all life? He did not see the knife hidden behind the smile. He did not sense the tension in the room. He sat at the head of the table, drinking the wine offered by his brother, laughing at the jokes. Then, at the height of the festivities, Seth stood up. He clapped his hands for silence. The music stopped. The dancers froze. The 72 conspirators moved quietly to the perimeter of the room, locking the doors, blocking the exits. Seth gestured to his servants. They brought in the chest. A gasp went through the room. It was stunning. The gold caught the flicker of the torchlight. The blue lapis lazuli seemed to glow with an inner light. Everyone wanted it. Everyone coveted it. "This chest," Seth announced, his voice smooth and deep, echoing off the stone walls, "is a gift. But it is a special gift. I have decided that I will give this treasure to whomever it fits most perfectly. Let us play a game. Let each of you lie down inside. If your body fits the interior as a hand fits a glove, the chest is yours." It was a parlor game, a jest. The guests laughed. They lined up, eager to claim the prize. One by one, the gods and nobles climbed into the box. First, a minor god of the harvest climbed in. He was too short. There was too much space at his feet. The crowd laughed. He climbed out, disappointed. Then, a tall goddess of the river tried. She was too tall. Her head bumped against the wood. She could not lie flat. Then, perhaps, one of the conspirators tried, just to sell the deception. He was too broad in the shoulders. He squeezed and grunted, but could not settle in. "Too small!" cried the crowd. "Too big! Too wide!" The game continued. The tension in the room was disguised as merriment, but the air was growing thin. Seth watched, his arms crossed over his chest, his eyes fixed on the king. Finally, Osiris stood up. "Let me try," the king said. "Perhaps it was made for me." The room went silent. The conspirators held their breath. Osiris walked to the chest. He admired the craftsmanship. He ran his hand over the cedar wood. He stepped inside. He lay down. He settled his shoulders against the satin lining. He stretched out his legs. He rested his head. It was perfect. "It fits," Osiris said, looking up at the ceiling, perhaps seeing the face of his brother looming over the rim of the box. "It fits me, exactly." "Yes," Seth whispered. "It fits you for eternity." The trap snapped shut. In an instant, the 72 conspirators rushed forward. They did not give the king time to stand. They did not give him time to summon his magic. They grabbed the heavy lid of the chest, a slab of cedar and gold weighing hundreds of pounds, and slammed it down. The sound of the lid hitting the frame was the sound of the end of the world. Thud. Osiris shouted from inside. He pushed up, but 72 demons threw themselves onto the lid. They held it down. Then came the hammer. Seth produced a hammer and nails, long iron nails. With a violence that shocked even the gods, he drove the nails into the wood, sealing the lid to the box. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of metal biting into wood, sealing the fate of the king. But nails were not enough. The box had to be airtight. Seth called for molten lead. The conspirators poured the hot gray metal over the seams of the chest, filling the cracks, sealing the keyhole. Inside the dark, hot box, Osiris gasped. The air was running out. The music of the banquet was muffled now, replaced by the frantic beating of his own heart. He scratched at the wood. He called out for Isis. He called out for Ra, but the lead had sealed him in silence. The king of life was suffocating. The breath of the cosmos was being snuffed out. The party was over. The music had turned to a funeral dirge, though no one was weeping yet. The room was paralyzed with shock. The guests, who were not part of the conspiracy, fled into the night, screaming the news that the king had fallen. But Seth was not finished. He knew that as long as the body remained, there was hope. He had to remove the king from the land of the living entirely. "Take it up," he commanded. The 72 lifted the heavy chest, now a coffin, the first sarcophagus in history. They carried it out of the hall, into the cool night air. They marched to the banks of the Nile. The irony was cruel. The Nile was Osiris. It was his fluid, his lifeblood. And now, Seth was using it as the disposal site. They swung the chest back and forth, 1, 2, 3, and heaved it into the river. It splashed into the dark water. The current caught it. The heavy box bobbed for a moment, then sank beneath the surface, drifting north toward the sea, toward the tanitic mouth of the Nile. Osiris was gone. The effect on the world was instantaneous. The myth says that when the chest hit the water, the great Jed pillar, the backbone of the universe, cracked. The stability of the world was broken. The sun rose the next morning, but it seemed dimmer. The wind from the desert blew harder, carrying the sand into the temples, covering the altars. The people woke up with a sense of dread they could not explain. The crops seemed to wilt. The cattle lowed in the fields. Seth declared himself king. He did not ascend the throne with the grace of his brother. He took it. He sat on the golden seat of the pharaohs, his red hair flaming, his iron scepter in his hand. He was the strong king. He imposed martial law. He declared that the age of soft rule was over. Now was the age of strength. Now was the age of the storm. He had won. He had eliminated the rival. He had taken the power. But he had underestimated one thing. He had underestimated the power of grief, and he had underestimated the power of love. While the court cowered before the new Red King, a wail went up from the women's quarters. It was a sound that would become the prototype for all funeral lamentations in Egypt for 3,000 years. Isis had heard the news. She cut her hair. She tore her fine linen robes. She rubbed ash on her beautiful face. But she did not collapse. Isis is not a goddess of passive sorrow. She is the great of magic. She is the clever one. She knew her husband was dead, but she also knew that death was not an absolute barrier for one who possessed the secret names of things. She needed the body. Thus began the Great Wanderings. While Seth sat on the throne, consolidating his power, sending his demons out to patrol the borders, Isis transformed herself. She became a kite, a bird of prey with a shrill cry. She flew over the delta, scanning the reeds, scanning the mud, looking for the chest. Nephthys, the wife of Seth, joined her. This is a pivotal moment for the character of Nephthys. She was married to the murderer. She was the queen of the new regime, but her loyalty lay with her sister, and with the balance of life. She abandoned Seth. She left the bed of the usurper and walked into the morning with Isis. Together the two sisters roamed the land. They were the Drit, the two kites. They cried out to the wind, asking the children, asking the fishermen, asking the spirits of the trees, "Have you seen the chest? Have you seen the beautiful being?" Seth, sitting in his palace, felt the ground shake. He felt the magic of the sisters working against him. He realized that the murder was not the end of the story. It was merely the opening move of a much longer, darker game. He had thrown the chest into the river to be rid of it, but the river flows to the sea, and the sea connects to the world. The chest drifted. It did not rot. It was protected by the magic of the cedar and the lead. It floated out into the Mediterranean, the great green. It washed ashore far away, in the land of Byblos, in Phoenicia. There, a miracle occurred. A tamarisk tree, sensing the divine presence within the box, grew around it. It grew with supernatural speed, encasing the coffin in its trunk. The tree became massive, fragrant, and beautiful. The king of Byblos, admiring the tree, cut it down and used the trunk, containing the body of Osiris, as a pillar in his palace. So, the king of Egypt was now a pillar in a foreign land, hidden, lost. Back in Egypt, Seth's rule grew harsher. He sensed that the body had not been destroyed. He could feel the Osirian energy still lingering in the cosmos. He became paranoid. He began to hunt not just for animals, but for the ghost of his brother. He patrolled the marshes at night, transforming into a black pig, a crocodile, a hippopotamus, thrashing through the reeds, looking for signs of rebellion. The psychological weight of the murder began to press on him. This is a crucial aspect of Seth's character arc. He is not a psychopath who feels nothing. He is a god of passion. He felt the guilt, but he transmuted it into rage. He told himself it was necessary. He told himself that Osiris was weak, that the world needed the iron fist to survive the threats of the void. He justified the fratricide as an act of cosmic hygiene. But the blood on his hands would not wash off. The red of the desert was now the red of the crime. Meanwhile, Isis, through her magic and the help of scorpions and children, tracked the scent of the chest to Byblos. She traveled there, disguised as a nursemaid. She revealed her divinity, split the pillar, and retrieved the coffin. She brought it back to Egypt, hiding it in the thick papyrus swamps of Chemmis in the delta. She opened the lid. She saw the face of her husband. He was cold. He was still. But he was not decayed. He was preserved, waiting. And here, in the silence of the swamp, Isis performed a feat of magic that defied the laws of Seth's new world. She turned herself into a bird again, a kite. She hovered over the dead body of Osiris. She beat her wings, creating air, creating breath. She fanned life back into his member. She drew the seed from the dead god. It was a conception of defiance. From death, life was stolen. In the belly of the grieving widow, a new god was kindled, a seed of vengeance, Horus. Seth did not know this yet. He sat on his throne, believing the line of Osiris was extinguished. He did not hear the heartbeat in the swamp. He did not know that his act of sterilization had inadvertently created the very force that would eventually challenge him. But he would find out soon enough. For the body of Osiris was not safe yet. Isis had to leave it to gather herbs for the resurrection spell. And while she was gone, hunting in the moonlight, Seth came to the swamp. He was hunting boars. He was in his element, wild and ferocious. He sniffed the air. He smelled the cedar. He smelled the gold. He smelled the brother. He pushed aside the reeds. And there, in the moonlight, he saw the chest again. He saw the body. The rage that exploded in Seth at that moment was not human. It was cataclysmic. He had killed him once. Why did he not stay dead? Why did the universe refuse to accept the new order? He realized that a body can be mourned. A body can be buried. A body can be magical. To truly destroy Osiris, he had to destroy the integrity of the form. He drew his knife, a knife of flint and iron. He stood over the corpse of his brother, and he began to cut. He did not just stab, he dismantled. He cut off a hand. He cut off a foot. He severed the head. He hacked the torso. 14 pieces. He took the body of the king and turned it into a jigsaw puzzle of flesh. And then, with a roar of triumph, he scattered the pieces. He threw the head into one province, the leg into another, the heart into the river. He sowed the land of Egypt with the dismembered corpse of its king. "Now!" Seth screamed to the night sky. "Now! Let them try to put him back together! Now let him rise!" He stood alone in the swamp, covered in the blood of his kin, panting, wild-eyed. He had done the unthinkable. He had not just murdered. He had unmade. He had shattered the image of godhood. He returned to his palace, believing the deed was finally done. He believed he was now the undisputed, eternal ruler of everything. There was no body left to bury. There was no king left to mourn. There was only chaos, scattered to the winds. But Seth forgot the lesson of the desert. You can scatter the sand, but you cannot destroy it. And he forgot the lesson of the seed. You can bury it in the dark, but that is exactly where it grows. The coffin is empty. The body is gone. The pieces are lost. And somewhere in the reeds, a child is being born. A falcon is breaking its shell. But the trial is far from over. In fact, the legal battle for the cosmos hasn't even begun. We will fast forward. The child in the swamp has grown up. The falcon has taken flight. We will enter the great tribunal. We will witness a court case that lasts for 80 years. A legal nightmare of bureaucracy, insults, and bizarre contests. We will see Seth and Horus face off not just with weapons, but with words, with magic, and with shape-shifting duels that will test the patience of the entire Ennead. The silence of the coffin is broken by the gavel of the judge. In the realm of the gods is not measured in years or seasons. It is measured in eras. The child grew. The falcon spread his wings. And the inevitable collision between the uncle and the nephew could no longer be postponed. We leave the physical battlefield and enter a different kind of arena. It is not a place of swords and blood, at least not initially. It is a place of words, of laws, and of a bureaucratic nightmare so profound that it paralyzed the universe for nearly a century. We are entering the hall of the Ennead. We are witnessing the great contendings. The Chester Beatty Papyrus I. Unlike the somber religious tone of the pyramid texts, this papyrus, written during the reign of Ramses V, presents a narrative that is raw, raucous, and deeply psychological. It portrays the gods not just as distant statues, but as bickering, flawed, and exhausted personalities trapped in a legal deadlock that has lasted for 80 years. Imagine the scene. The tribunal is set on the Island of Fire, a mythical location suspended in the cosmic ocean. The air is thick with the heat of debate. The greatest gods of the pantheon are seated on their judging chairs. At the head sits Ra-Horakhti, the lord of the universe, the sun god who ages but never dies. Beside him is Shu, the god of air, Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe of wisdom, and the rest of the Ennead. And standing before them are the two rivals. On one side stands Horus. He is young, radiant, and entitled. He claims the throne by right of blood. He is the son of Osiris. In the Egyptian legal system, inheritance is paramount. The son succeeds the father. It is the law of nature. Horus argues that Seth is a usurper, a violent interloper who stole what was not his. On the other side stands Seth. Let us look at him closely in this moment. He is no longer the wild outcast of the desert. He has been king for years. He wears the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, though it sits uneasily on his brow. He leans on a scepter made of electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver, weighing 4,500 pounds. He does not argue from a place of lineage. He argues from a place of reality. "I am the strongest," Seth declares, his voice rumbling like the tectonic plates beneath the Red Sea. "I am the only one among you who can stand at the prow of the solar bark and slay the serpent Apophis. If you give the throne to this boy, this fragile bird, who will protect you when the sun goes down? Who will spear the monster? Strength must rule. Without strength, Ma'at is just a word." It is a compelling argument. And it is the reason the trial has dragged on for 80 years. The Ennead is divided. The court is frozen. Ra-Horakhti, the presiding judge, secretly favors Seth. Why? Because Ra is old. He values the brute strength that keeps the darkness at bay. He looks at Horus and sees a child with soft hands. He looks at Seth and sees a warrior who has proven his worth every single night in the terrifying depths of the Duat. Ra calls Seth, "Great of strength, son of Nut." He stalls the proceedings. He refuses to pass judgment. Thoth, the god of wisdom, and Shu, the god of air, favor Horus. They argue for the principle of legitimacy. Justice cannot be based on muscle alone. It must be based on the right order of succession. Day after day, year after year, the arguments repeat. The gods are tired. The cosmos is suffering from the indecision. When the head is unsure, the body falters. The Nile floods are erratic. The borders are unstable. The people of Egypt are waiting for a king, but the gods cannot decide between the protector and the heir. The frustration reaches a boiling point. The Chester Beatty Papyrus tells us that the gods eventually retire to a secluded island to eat and rest, banning anyone from approaching them. They specifically ban Isis, the mother of Horus, because they know she is the cleverest of them all. They tell the ferryman of the gods, a curmudgeonly figure named Anti, "Do not ferry any woman across to us." But Seth knows that words are failing him. He is a creature of action, not debate. He feels the tide of opinion turning against him, influenced by the nagging wisdom of Thoth. He craves a contest. He craves a physical manifestation of his superiority. If he cannot win with law, he will win with endurance. Seth stands up in the council and issues a challenge. "Let the boy come forward," he roars. "Let us turn ourselves into hippopotamuses. We will plunge into the depths of the great green, the sea or the river. And the one who surface first to breathe shall be disqualified. The one who can hold his breath the longest, submerged in the dark water, shall be king." It is a challenge that plays entirely to Seth's strengths. The hippopotamus is a Sethian animal, heavy, aggressive, thick-skinned, and capable of staying underwater for long periods. It is a creature of the chaotic depths. Horus is a falcon. Falcons do not swim. Falcons drown. But Horus accepts. He has no choice. To refuse is to show weakness. The two gods transform. The air shimmers with heat and magic. The lean, muscular form of Seth expands, bloats, and hardens into the massive, gray-skinned bulk of a bull hippo. He opens a mouth filled with ivory tusks that can snap a crocodile in half. Horus, using his mother's magic, also shifts, taking on the form of the river beast. They plunge into the water. Splash. The surface ripples and then goes still. Imagine the scene underwater. It is murky, silent, and cold. The two massive beasts settle on the riverbed, surrounded by the silt of the Nile. They stare at each other. This is a test of will. It is a test of who can endure the suffocation the longest. Seth is in his element. He can stay here for days, weeks, maybe months. He settles into the mud, slowing his heart, becoming one with the heaviness of the river. On the shore, Isis is pacing. She is frantic. She knows her son cannot beat Seth in a contest of brute endurance. She watches the bubbles stop rising. She waits. Hours pass. The gods watch from the bank, bored and impassive. Isis cannot stand it. She decides to cheat. Or, as she would see it, she decides to intervene to save Mahat. She fashions a harpoon. She ties a rope to it. She casts it into the water, aiming for the spot where the hippopotamuses lie. The harpoon flies true. It pierces the water. It strikes. But in the murky depths, she makes a mistake. The harpoon bites into the flesh of Horus, her own son. Horus screams in pain from the depths, a bubbling, gurgling cry. "Mother, you have pierced me! Call off your weapon!" Horus surfaces, thrashing, the copper barb lodged in his flank. Isis is horrified. She speaks the words of magic to release the weapon. "Let go, blade. Release him, you who are made of my blood." The harpoon falls away. She throws again. This time she aims with the eyes of a hawk. The harpoon strikes Seth. It sinks deep into his thick hide. Seth roars. He surfaces, the water churning around him, red blood staining the green river. He looks at Isis on the bank. And here we see a moment of profound psychological complexity in the character of the Red God. He does not attack her. He does not threaten to kill her. He appeals to her emotion. He appeals to their shared history. "What have I done to you, my sister?" Seth cries out, the water streaming from his snout. "Why do you pierce me? I am your brother. We are of the same blood. We kicked together in the womb of Nut. Why do you hate me?" The plea strikes Isis in her heart. Despite everything, despite the murder of Osiris, despite the war, Seth is still her brother. They are the children of the sky. The bond of the Ennead is strong. She feels a sudden pang of pity for this lonely, violent, red-headed god who is now bleeding in the river. She hesitates. She speaks the word of release. The harpoon falls from Seth's skin. He is free, but Horus is watching. The falcon has surfaced, and he sees his mother show mercy to the enemy. The rage of the young prince is instantaneous and terrifying. In this moment, Horus displays a flash of Seth-like violence. He leaps from the water, seizes his own mother, and in a blind fury decapitates her. The gods scream. The trial dissolves into chaos. Isis, being a great magician, does not die. She transforms into a statue or ascends to the sky, eventually restoring her head, sometimes described as receiving the head of a cow. But the contest is ruined. The hippopotamus trial proves nothing, except that the family is broken beyond repair. The tribunal moves again. They go to the western desert, to the mountains. They are running out of patience. Seth is furious. He feels betrayed by the intervention, but he also feels validated. The boy is unstable. The mother is interfering. He demands a new trial. He demands isolation. He orders the ferryman Anti, "Cross to the island of the middle, and on your life, do not bring Isis across. If a woman comes, beat her away." Seth retires to his tent on the island. He is tired. The water of the river is still cold on his skin. He wants to sleep. He wants to eat. He wanders through the trees of the island, seeking solitude. But Isis is not done. She transforms again. This time, she does not become a bird or a queen. She becomes an old woman. She walks with a stoop. She carries a bowl of flour. She wears a golden ring on her finger. She approaches the ferryman Anti. He stops her. "I cannot take you," he grunts. "Seth has forbidden women." "I am an old woman," she croaks. "I am going to take food to my son, who is herding cattle on the island. He is hungry. Will you deny a mother feeding her child?" Anti is greedy. He looks at the bread. He looks at the gold ring. "Give me the bread," he says. She gives it. "And the ring." She gives it. He ferries her across. Once on the island, Isis changes her shape again. She sheds the skin of the crone. She becomes a young woman, breathtakingly beautiful, dressed in the finest linen, her hair smelling of myrrh. She positions herself on the path where she knows Seth will walk. Seth comes crashing through the undergrowth. He sees her. He stops. The red god is a creature of impulse. He sees beauty, and he wants to possess it. He forgets the trial. He forgets the danger. He walks up to her. "Who are you, beautiful one?" he asks. "And why are you here alone?" Isis looks down, feigning tears. "I am a widow," she says, her voice trembling. "My husband, a shepherd, died. He left me with a son and a herd of cattle. But then a stranger came, a foreigner. He beat my son. He took the cattle. He threw us out of our home. I have come to the great god Seth for justice. Help me, Lord." Seth puffs out his chest. He is the defender, after all. He hates injustice when it is framed this way. The story triggers his instinct to protect the weak against the bully. "The scoundrel!" Seth shouts, slamming his fist into his palm. "Shall the cattle be given to the stranger while the son of the father is still alive? Never! I would smash his face. The son must inherit." Snap. The trap closes. Isis laughs. It is a sound like wind chimes, but sharper. She transforms. The beautiful woman vanishes. A kite flies up into the branches of an acacia tree. "You have judged yourself, Seth," she calls down. "You have spoken the law with your own mouth. Shall the cattle, the throne, be given to the stranger, you, while the son, Horus, is still alive?" Seth stands there, stunned. He realizes what he has done. He has admitted, in front of witnesses, for the gods are always listening, that the son must succeed the father. He has legally validated Horus's claim. His face turns the color of a bruised sunset. He screams in rage. He tears up the trees by their roots. He runs to the shore and finds Anti, the ferryman. In a fit of punishment, he flays the skin from the ferryman's feet, which is why, the myths say, the hawk god Anti is often depicted with his feet wrapped in bandages. He returns to the Ennead. He is fuming, but the verdict has been spoken. Ra-Horakhti looks at him with disappointment. The legal argument is lost, but Seth is not defeated. If the law fails, he goes back to physics. He goes back to force. "Fine," Seth spits. "She tricked me with words. Words are wind. Let us see who is truly stronger." I challenge the boy to a race. A boat race. But not in wooden boats. We will build boats of stone. Massive, heavy stone. The one who can sail his stone boat and win the race shall be king. It is an absurd challenge. Stone does not float. But Seth believes that his strength is so great that he can will the stone to float. He believes that his dominance over the earth element is absolute. Horus accepts. But Horus is not strong like Seth. He is cunning like Isis. Horus goes to the cedar forests. He cuts down a tall cedar tree. He builds a sleek, fast wooden boat. But then he covers it with gypsum plaster. He paints the plaster to look like granite. It looks heavy. It looks like solid rock, but it is light as a feather. Seth, in his arrogance and honesty, goes to the mountain. He hews the top off a peak. He carves a massive block of granite, 20 cubits long. It weighs tons. He drags it to the riverbank, sweating, his muscles bulging, the ground shaking with every step. The day of the race arrives. The banks of the Nile are crowded with gods and spirits. Horus launches his stone boat. It bobs lightly on the water. It floats high and fast. Seth laughs. "Watch this!" he yells. He pushes his granite mountain into the river. He jumps on top of it. Glug! The boat sinks like a stone. It plunges straight to the bottom of the Nile, taking Seth with it. The crowd gasps. Horus's boat glides past the winner. But Seth is not dead. He is the Lord of Storms. He is not embarrassed anymore. He is incandescent with fury. He realizes Horus has cheated again. The boat was wood. Seth transforms. He explodes out of the water. He does not come up as a man. He comes up as a hippopotamus again, massive, red-eyed, and destructive. He charges at Horus's wooden boat. He crashes into it. His tusks shatter the cedar wood. The boat capsizes. Horus falls into the water. Now there are no boats. There are no rules. There is only a hippo and a falcon in the churning water. The legal proceedings have completely collapsed. The Tribunal of 80 Years has ended not with a verdict, but with a brawl. Seth tries to crush Horus. Horus tries to harpoon Seth. The Ennead covers their eyes. They cannot watch. The stalemate is absolute. The law has failed. The contests have failed. The trickery has failed. Seth climbs onto the bank, shaking the water from his skin, returning to his human form. He is panting. He looks at Horus, who stands dripping on the sand. The red god realizes that public contests are not working. He needs to do something more intimate. He needs to dominate Horus in a way that cannot be undone. He needs to shame him. He needs to strip him of his masculinity and his power. He walks over to Horus. He puts a heavy hand on the boy's shoulder. His voice changes. It is no longer the roar of the thunder. It is the low, dangerous purr of the predator inviting the prey into his den. "Come, nephew," Seth says. "Let us stop this fighting for a day. Come to my house. Let us hold a party. Let us drink wine and sleep under my roof. We will talk." Horus looks at him. He is wary, but he is also exhausted. And perhaps, in his youthful arrogance, he thinks he can outwit the older god once more. He agrees. They walk together toward Seth's palace. The sun is setting, turning the sky a deep, bruised purple. The air is heavy, with impending violation. The bureaucratic nightmare is over. The physical war is paused. But a psychological violation is about to begin. Seth has a plan that involves neither stone boats nor harpoons. He intends to use his sexuality as a weapon. He intends to assert his dominance in the bedchamber. And this leads us to the most delicate, the most bizarre, and the most critical turning point of the entire myth. The story of the hands, the seed, and the lettuce. The tribunal is closed. The bedroom door is opening. Seth is resilient. He does not drown. He just changes his strategy. The storm is moving indoors. Now the sun has set. The shouting of the riverbank has faded. The public spectacle is over. But the war is not. It has merely moved from the open air into the suffocating intimacy of the bedchamber. We enter the most sensitive, the most graphic, and perhaps the most psychologically complex chapter of the entire Egyptian mythos. It is a story that was often sanitized by later Victorian translators, but to understand Seth, we must look at it directly. We must understand that for the ancients, sexuality was not merely about reproduction or pleasure. It was about dominance. It was about hierarchy. To penetrate was to conquer. To be penetrated was to be made a subordinate. Seth, having failed to defeat Horus with stone boats and harpoons, decides to defeat him with shame. The invitation has been accepted. Horus, young and perhaps overconfident, has agreed to spend the day in Seth's palace. Imagine the tension as they walk through the gates of Seth's stronghold. This is not the airy, light-filled palace of Osiris. This is a fortress of heavy stone, lit by flickering torches that cast long, dancing shadows. The air smells of roasted meat, strong wine, and ozone. Seth plays the role of the gracious host. He offers wine. He offers food. He disarms the nephew with camaraderie. "We are family," he says, his voice a low rumble. "Let us put aside the weapons. Let us rest." They retire to the sleeping quarters. It is a room of luxury, but it is the luxury of a predator's den. The linens are fine, but the atmosphere is heavy. As the night deepens and sleep takes hold of the house, Seth makes his move. The Chester Beatty Papyrus describes the scene with stark clarity. Seth rises. His manhood is stiff, a symbol of his aggressive, uncontrollable virility. He seeks to commit an act of sexual violence against Horus. His intention is not desire. It is political negation. If he can use Horus as a woman, if he can deposit his seed within the boy, then Horus can never be king. A king must be whole. A king must be impenetrable. Seth whispers, "How beautiful are your buttocks, Horus. They are broad." It is the prelude to the assault. But Horus is awake. He is the falcon. His eyes are always open. He anticipates the move. As Seth attempts to force himself upon the nephew, Horus reacts with a dexterity born of desperation. He does not fight back with fists. He fights with his hand. He catches the seed of Seth. He catches the poison of the uncle in his palm, preventing it from entering his body. The act is done, or so Seth thinks. The red god collapses into a deep, satisfied sleep, believing he has finally won. He believes that tomorrow he can stand before the Ennead and declare that Horus is his beloved, his subordinate, effectively nullifying the boy's claim to the throne. But Horus is awake, and he is holding the evidence of his own destruction in his hand. He runs. He flees the palace of the uncle and goes to the one person who can fix the unfixable. He goes to his mother, Isis. Isis is waiting in the marshes. When Horus shows her his hand, cupping the divine seed of Seth, she cries out in horror. To her, this is not just biological matter. It is a magical contaminant. It is the essence of chaos attempting to infect the line of Osiris. Her reaction is brutal and immediate. She does not wash his hand. She grabs a knife and cuts the hand off. Thwack! She throws the severed hand into the water, into the marshes of the delta. It is a radical act of cleansing. Then, with her supreme magic, she generates a new hand for her son, restoring him to wholeness. The contamination is gone. But Isis knows that defense is not enough. They must counterattack. They must turn Seth's own weapon against him. She asks Horus, "Do you have any of your own seed? Can you produce the essence of your life?" Horus, though young, is a god. He produces his seed. Isis collects it in a jar. She holds the genetic potential of the rightful king in her hands. Now she needs a delivery system. She knows Seth's habits. She knows his appetites. She knows that every morning the red god likes to walk in his garden to eat his favorite vegetable, lettuce. In ancient Egypt, the lettuce was not the leafy, watery plant we know today. It was tall, phallic, and when broken, it oozed a milky white sap. It was the sacred plant of Min, the god of fertility, and it was the favorite snack of Seth. It represented potency. Isis creeps into Seth's garden before dawn. She finds the finest, tallest heads of lettuce, the ones glistening with dew. She takes the seed of Horus and spreads it over the leaves, mixing it with the vegetable's natural sap. It is invisible. It is a trap laid in the very food of the enemy's vanity. Morning comes. Seth wakes up, stretching his iron muscles, feeling victorious. He walks into his garden, the morning sun hitting his red hair. He is hungry. He sees the lettuce. He picks it. He eats it. He eats the seed of Horus. He swallows the essence of his rival. He takes it into his belly. And with that bite, the balance of power shifts fundamentally. Seth, the penetrator, has become the vessel. The eater has been eaten from the inside. Later that day, Seth strides into the hall of judgment. He is glowing with arrogance. He calls for the Ennead to assemble. "Listen to me," Seth booms. "The trial is over. You cannot give the crown to Horus. He is not a man. I have used him. I have done the work of a male upon him. He is my subordinate." The gods gasp. They look at Horus with disgust. In their eyes, a king cannot be a victim. But Horus stands calm. "He lies," the falcon says. "I am whole. Check us. Call the seed. Let the seed speak." This is a specific form of Egyptian magic. The essence of a god is conscious. It can answer a summons. Thoth, the scribe, steps forward. He raises his hand. "I call the seed of Seth," Thoth chants. "If you are inside Horus, come forth." Silence. Then a muffled voice answers, not from Horus, but from the water, from the marshes where the severed hand was thrown. "I am here," the seed cries, "but I am trapped in the mud." Seth is confused. He frowns. Thoth turns to Seth. "I call the seed of Horus," Thoth chants. "If you are inside Seth, come forth." Seth laughs. "It is not here. I am here," a voice says. It comes from Seth's own body. It travels up his spine, past his throat, into his head. "Come forth," Thoth commands. The seed of Horus erupts from Seth's forehead. It takes the form of a golden disk, the moon, or perhaps the sun disk itself. It shines with a blinding light. Seth stumbles back, clutching his head. He has given birth to the sign of his own defeat. He, the sterile god, has become pregnant with his enemy's glory. Thoth reaches out and takes the golden disk, placing it on his own head as an ornament. The court erupts in laughter. The great Seth, The macho warrior has been tricked into carrying the child of his rival. The humiliation is total. But Seth does not shrink from humiliation. He explodes from it. The laughter of the gods is like gasoline on the fire of his rage. He realizes that magic and trickery will always defeat him. He cannot win a battle of wits against Isis. He reverts to his primal nature, violence. "Enough of this," Seth screams. "No more tricks, no more lettuce. I will fight him. I will tear him apart with my bare hands." The war enters its bloodiest phase. It is no longer a contest. It is a brawl for survival. The myths here diverge and intertwine, but the central event is the mutual mutilation. The eye and the testicles. They meet in the desert. There are no referees this time. Seth transforms into a black pig, a creature of pure taboo. Or perhaps he fights in his own red-headed form. He lunges at Horus. He does not aim for the heart. He aims for the perception. He gouges out Horus's eye. This is the Wadjet, the left eye, the moon eye. It represents wholeness, healing, and the orderly perception of the universe. By taking the eye, Seth blinds the god of the sky. He plunges the world into darkness. He tries to make Horus like himself, unable to see the Ma'at, unable to navigate the path of righteousness. But Horus is not passive. In the struggle, he reaches down. He grabs Seth by the groin. With the strength of a falcon's talon, he rips off Seth's testicles. This is the loss of the Sekhem. The testicles represent Seth's storm power, his virility, the raw energy that drives the thunder. Imagine the two gods lying in the sand, bleeding. One has lost his sight, order/perception. The other has lost his seed, chaos/generation. The universe is broken. The moon is gone from the sky, and the storm has lost its thunder. Hathor, the goddess of love and huv and beauty, eventually finds Horus weeping in the desert. She catches a gazelle, milks it, and pours the milk into the empty socket of the eye, restoring his sight. The eye is healed. It becomes the sound eye, the symbol of protection used on every amulet in Egypt. But Seth's testicles, they are gone. Or, in some versions, they are grafted onto a lotus flower. Seth remains permanently scarred, a eunuch warrior, his power now purely destructive rather than generative. The stalemate is even worse than before. They are both damaged. The Ennead is exhausted. 80 years have passed. The land is falling into ruin. They realize that no one on Earth can solve this. They need a judge who is beyond the reach of bribes, beyond the reach of fear, and beyond the reach of death. They decide to write a letter to the West, to the Duat, to Osiris. For 80 years, Osiris has been silent, ruling the kingdom of the dead. He has watched the squabbling from his throne in the Hall of Truths. Thoth sits down and writes the letter. He outlines the case. He asks the king of the dead to choose. The scroll is sealed. It is taken by a messenger down into the necropolis, through the gates of the night, to the foot of the dark throne. Days pass. The gods wait nervously. Then the messenger returns. He carries a scroll that smells of the grave. Thoth opens it. He reads the words of Osiris, and they are terrifying. Why is my son being defrauded? The letter begins. I am the one who made you strong. I made the barley and the wheat, which support the gods as well as the cattle. No other god did this. I gave you life. Seth interrupts. He is foolish enough to argue with the letter. That means nothing. We are strong without you. But Thoth reads on. Osiris continues. And do not forget, I am the Lord of the West. I have dispatched the demons of the destruction, the ones with the savage faces. They answer only to me. They do not fear gods or men. I can send them to fetch the heart of any wrongdoer and bring it to my table of judgment. The land of the dead is the final destination for all of you. Even you, Seth, will eventually have to come to me. And when you do, the threat hangs in the air like a guillotine. Osiris is reminding them of the ultimate reality. Death wins. Always. Even Ra, the sun god, is shaken. He realizes he cannot protect Seth from the wrath of the underworld. The political cost is too high. Ra bows his head. The king is right, Ra says. The throne belongs to Horus. The gavel finally falls. Seth looks around. He sees the faces of the gods. He sees Isis, triumphant. He sees Horus, his eye shining, wearing the double crown. He sees that he is alone. He is legally defeated. He is physically castrated. He is sexually humiliated. But here is the twist. Here is the genius of Egyptian mythology. They do not kill Seth. In a Western fairy tale, the villain would be slain, his head put on a spike. But in Egypt, you cannot kill one half of the universe. If you destroy Seth, you destroy the storm. You destroy the strength needed to fight Apophis. You destroy the necessary chaos that prevents stagnation. Ra stands up. He looks at the sullen, defeated red god. Let Seth be given to me, Ra decrees. He shall dwell with me in the sky. He shall be the voice that shouts from the heavens so that men fear him and respect him. Ra adopts Seth. He takes him up from the earth, where he caused so much trouble, and places him in the atmosphere. Seth becomes the god of thunder, the voice in the sky. The Egyptians explained the storm as Seth shouting his grievances, eternally angry, eternally loud, but separated from the earth where he could do damage to the harvest. And more importantly, Ra gives him a job that only a monster can do. You shall stand at the prow of my boat, Ra says. You shall use that spear. You shall use that rage. And every night, when the rest of us are trembling in the dark, you shall look the serpent in the eye. Seth accepts. It is a restoration of his dignity. He is not king of Egypt. That belongs to the fertile Horus. But he is the king of the fight. He is the slayer. The trial of 80 years ends not with an execution, but with a reassignment. Horus rules the land. Seth rules the storm. The balance is restored. Ma'at is satisfied. But for Seth, the story is not over. He has lost the throne, but he has gained a purpose. He is now the solitary guardian of the solar journey. He leaves the court. He leaves the lettuce gardens and the palaces. He boards the great manjet, the boat of millions of years. He picks up his iron harpoon. He stands at the front, his strange animal ears twitching, his eyes scanning the horizon. The sun is dipping below the western mountain. The sky is turning red, his color. The boat is approaching the gap in the mountains, the entrance to the Duat. Below the surface, in the waters of noon, the great enemy is waking up. The coils of Apophis are tightening. The legal battle is done. The cosmic war is about to begin. The sun is setting, the shadows are long, and the serpent is waiting. We leave the solid ground entirely. We are not in the desert, and we are not in the Nile Valley. We are stepping onto the deck of a ship that sails on waters darker than ink. We are entering the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. And it is here, in the terrifying silence of the deep night, that Seth reveals his true, indispensable nature. It is here that the murderer becomes the savior. To understand this transformation, we must understand the journey of the sun. For the ancient Egyptians, the sun god Ra did not simply set. He died. Every evening, as the golden disk dipped below the western horizon at Abydos, Ra became an old man, a shriveled corpse known as Auf-Ra, or flesh of Ra. He entered the mouth of the sky goddess Nut, who swallowed him whole. The night was not a time of rest. It was a journey through the digestive tract of the cosmos, a 12-hour voyage of regeneration. Ra had to travel through 12 caverns, 12 distinct regions of the afterlife, to be reborn as a child in the east at dawn. This journey was the central engine of the universe. If the boat stopped, time stopped. If the boat sank, creation dissolved. Ra travels in a vessel known as the Mesektet, the night bark. It is not a boat of wood and sail. It is a construct of living magic. Its crew is elite. There is Sia, the personification of perception, standing at the lookout. There is Hu, the personification of authoritative utterance, ready to command the doors of the night to open. There is Heka, the god of magic, holding the scrolls of power. And there is Isis, the great magician, whispering spells to guide the way. But in the deepest part of the night, perception is not enough. Magic is not enough. Authority is worthless if you are dead. In the deepest dark, you need violence. And so, standing at the very prow of the boat, where the darkness is thickest, stands Seth. He is not the defeated, sullen god of the tribunal here. He is the Nubti, the one of gold, the lord of Ombos. He stands tall, his red hair bristling with static energy, his eyes scanning the void. In his hand, he holds a weapon that no other god can wield effectively in this realm, a spear of iron, tipped with flint, heavy and cruel. He is the bodyguard, and he is waiting for the 7th hour. The boat glides through the first few hours of the night. It passes the fields of the blessed dead, who cheer from the banks. It passes the lakes of fire where the damned are punished. The atmosphere is tense, but orderly. Then, the boat crosses the threshold of the 7th hour. The water disappears. The river of the underworld runs dry. The boat shudders and grinds to a halt. It is stuck on a sandbank. But this is not sand. It is the coils of a monster. Ahead of them, blocking the path to the dawn, lies the enemy. He has many names: the Roarer, the Earth Shaker, the Blind One, but mostly he is known as Apep, or Apophis. Apophis is not a god. He is older than gods. He is the remnant of the pre-creation chaos that was pushed aside when Atum rose from the waters. He is the embodiment of Isfet, pure, unadulterated entropy. He does not want to rule the world. He wants to eat it. He wants to return the universe to the state of non-existence, the silent, dark, watery void where nothing happens. He appears as a serpent of impossible size. The texts say his coils are made of flint. His roar is the sound of the earthquake. But his most dangerous weapon is not his venom, nor his crushing strength. It is his eyes. Apophis possesses a hypnotic gaze. When he looks at you, he does not just frighten you. He unmakes your will. He reflects the void. When the gods of the boat, even the great Ra, even the wise Thoth, look into the eyes of Apophis, they are paralyzed. They suffer from a condition the texts call the great inertia. Their hearts stop beating. Their magic fails. They stand frozen on the deck, statues of terror waiting to be swallowed. This is the sandbank of Apophis, the moment where time stops, the moment where the sun is stranded in the belly of the beast. Only one being is immune to the stare. Seth looks at the serpent, and he does not freeze. He smiles. Why? Because Seth recognizes Apophis. In the deep architecture of the soul, Seth and Apophis are kin. They are both creatures of chaos. They are both forces of disruption. But there is a crucial difference. Apophis is mindless chaos, the chaos of destruction. Seth is controlled chaos, the chaos of the storm that clears the air. Seth is the homeopathic cure. He is the small dose of poison used to treat the snake bite. He is the monster who chose to serve the light. The confrontation begins with sound. The Book of Amduat tells us that before the spear is thrown, Seth must engage in a duel of voices. Apophis hisses, a sound of pure negation, a white noise that seeks to erase reality. Seth roars back. It is the great cry. It is the sound of thunder. Seth serves as the amplifier for the magic of the boat. He screams the words of power that shatter the hypnotic silence. He insults the serpent. In ancient magic, to insult a thing is to gain power over it. "Go back, you rebel," Seth bellows into the darkness. "Ra triumphs over you. Your head is crushed. Your bones are broken. You are severed from your strength. Drift away, O one who should not exist." The roar breaks the paralysis. The air shivers. The serpent lunges. This is the moment depicted on temple walls and papyri for 1,000 years. Seth, legs braced on the prow of the solar bark, thrusts the spear. He does not aim for the body. He aims for the neck. He aims to sever the connection between the mind, the desire for nothingness, and the body, the power to destroy. The iron spear strikes. It is a collision of absolutes. The force of the strongest god meets the resistance of the void. Sparks of impossible color fly into the darkness. The serpent screams, a sound that shakes the roots of the mountains. Seth twists the spear. He channels his sekhem, his raw, violent vitality, down the shaft of the weapon. He forces the serpent to regurgitate the water it has swallowed. The river floods back into the channel. The night bark lifts. The sandbank dissolves. But the battle is not over. Apophis cannot be killed. He is non-existence. You cannot kill something that doesn't exist. You can only repel it. You can only wound it enough to pass by. For the duration of the 7th hour, Seth is a whirlwind of violence. He hacks at the coils. He stabs. He shouts. He is the berserker at the gate. He takes all the rage that led him to murder Osiris, all the bitterness of his exile, all the sexual frustration of his defeat by Horus, and he channels it into this single redemptive purpose. He saves his father, Ra. He saves the crew. He saves the morning. As the boat sails past the writhing, wounded body of the serpent, moving into the 8th hour, the gods on the deck begin to breathe again. The great inertia lifts. Ra opens his eyes. He looks at the red god, who is standing panting on the prow, his spear dripping with the black ichor of the void. And Ra speaks the title that confuses the moralists and angers the priests of Osiris. He calls Seth Mer-Ra, the beloved of Ra. This is the paradox of Seth. He is a murderer, a usurper, a rapist, and a chaotic force on earth. But in the underworld, he is the greatest hero. The universe, the Egyptians realized, is a dangerous place. It is surrounded by darkness. And to survive the darkness, you cannot just be good. You cannot just be just. Sometimes you have to be dangerous. You need a monster to kill a monster. This nightly battle was not just a story. It was a psychological comfort to the Egyptian people. When the sun went down, they knew the danger was real. They knew the serpent was waiting. But they also knew that the red god was on the boat. They knew that the storm was standing guard. There is a fascinating spell in the Book of the Dead, spell 108, where the deceased person identifies themselves with Seth to gain protection. I am Seth, the originator of confusion, who creates the thunder in the sky, the soul declares. By invoking Seth, the soul claims the power to repel the monsters of the grave. Even in the iconography of the tomb, this relationship is honored. In the tomb of Seti I, whose name literally means man of Seth, we see detailed depictions of this battle. The pharaoh, who in life must be an Osiris, a just ruler, in death needs to become a Seth, a warrior, to navigate the terrors of the transition. As the boat moves through the remaining hours of the night, past the weavers, past the star gods, past the gates of fire, Seth remains vigilant. He does not rest. He knows that Apophis will heal. He knows that tomorrow night the serpent will be waiting again. The war is eternal. It is a cycle that can never be won, only maintained. This endurance is another key aspect of Seth's character. He is the god of stamina. Horus won the throne, but he sits in a palace. Seth won the war, and he stands on a moving deck, fighting the same battle for millions of years. It is a lonely, grim, and essential duty. Finally, the 12th hour arrives. The boat enters the tail of a giant serpent, a benevolent one this time, and is dragged through its body to be reborn. The world reversal happens. The old corpse of Ra is left behind, and the sun emerges as Khepri, the scarab beetle, pushing the ball of the sun over the eastern horizon. The sky turns pink, then blue. The birds sing. The farmers in the Nile Valley wake up to a new day. They praise Osiris for the crops. They praise Horus for the king. They praise Isis for the health of their children. Few of them remember to praise the red god who stands invisible in the daylight, wiping the blood of the void from his spear, waiting for the sunset. But there was a time in Egyptian history when this changed. There was a time when Seth was brought out of the shadows and placed on the highest pedestal. There was a time when the pharaohs did not hide their connection to the chaos god, but flaunted it. We are moving now from the realm of myth to the realm of history. We are leaving the timeless boat of Ra and stepping into the chariot of the conquerors. In the northern delta, in a city of foreigners and warriors, a new cult is rising. They are people who do not fear the desert. They are people who see Seth not as the murderer of Osiris, but as the Lord of hosts, the god of foreign kings. The Hyksos are coming, and they are bringing the red god home. We have survived the night. We have stared down the great serpent and lived to tell the tale. We have seen that in the dark, the villain is the only hero that matters. The sun is up. The banners are unfurled. The chariots are rolling. Welcome back to the shifting sands of history. We have spent eons in the realm of the mythic. We have watched the birth of the cosmos, the murder of the Golden King, the unending tribunal of the gods, and the nightly battle against the void in the depths of the underworld. We have known Seth as the outcast, the usurper, the sexual aggressor, and the solitary hero of the solar bark. But myths do not exist in a vacuum. They are the dreams of a people. And as the people change, the dreams change. We leave the timeless halls of the Ennead and step onto the hard, sun-baked earth of human history. We are fast-forwarding to a time when the pyramids of Giza were already ancient monuments, standing silent in the haze. We are entering the second intermediate period and the New Kingdom, a time of blood, iron, and chariots. This is the era when the red god came down from the desert mountains and entered the throne room. This is the era when Seth was not whispered about in fear, but shouted about in triumph. This is the story of how the Lord of Chaos became the patron saint of the greatest empire Egypt would ever know. The story begins with a disaster, or, from Seth's perspective, an opportunity. Around 1650 BCE, the Middle Kingdom of Egypt collapsed. The central authority crumbled, and from the east, across the Sinai, came a wave of immigrants, warriors, and princes. The Egyptians called them the Hyksos, the rulers of foreign lands. The Greeks later corrupted this name into a word that still echoes with infamy, the Hyksos. They settled in the eastern delta in a city called Avaris. They were different. They wore multicolored woolen cloaks, not white linen. They had thick beards. They used weapons that the Egyptians had never seen, the composite bow that could pierce armor from a distance, and the horse-drawn chariot, the tank of the ancient world. And they brought their own gods. Their chief deity was Baal-zephon, the storm god of the Levant. Baal was a warrior. He wielded a thunderbolt and a mace. He defeated the sea monster Yam. He was powerful, violent, and vital. When the Hyksos looked at the Egyptian pantheon, they saw one face that looked familiar. They saw a god who also wielded a scepter of iron. They saw a god who controlled the storm. They saw a god who was an outsider. They saw Seth. In a remarkable act of theological fusion, the Hyksos identified Baal with Seth. They adopted Seth as their supreme deity. In the city of Avaris, they built a massive temple to Sutek, the Semitic pronunciation of his name. But they did not worship him as the murderer of Osiris. They worshipped him as the master of the sky, the lord of foreign countries, the god who binds the nations together. For the first time in history, Seth was the king of gods in a capital city. Imagine walking through the streets of Avaris in this period. It is a cosmopolitan hub. You hear Canaanite, Hurrian, and Egyptian spoken in the markets. The smell of incense is different, heavier, spicier. And in the great temple, the image of Seth has changed. He is no longer just the strange, beast-headed god. He is depicted wearing the horned helmet of a Syrian warrior, carrying a scimitar, with long tassels on his kilt. He has become a global god. But down in the south, in the city of Thebes, the remnants of the native Egyptian royalty held on. They worshipped Amun and Osiris. They viewed the Hyksos as unclean invaders, and they viewed Seth as the patron of the enemy. The tension between the north, Seth/Avaris, and the south, Amun/Thebes, simmered for generations. And it gave rise to a folk tale that is preserved in the papyrus Salier 1. It is a story that captures the absurdity and the supernatural dread of this Cold War. The story is called The Quarrel of Apophis and Sekenenra. Apophis was the Hyksos king in Avaris. Sekenenra Tau was the native Egyptian prince in Thebes. They were hundreds of miles apart. One day, Apophis sent a messenger to Thebes with a demand that baffled the court. The messenger stood before Prince Sekenenra and said, "King Apophis sends you this message. You must silence the hippopotamus pool which is in the east of your city, for they prevent me from sleeping. Their noise penetrates my ears, and I cannot rest." It was an impossible accusation. Avaris is hundreds of miles from Thebes. No hippopotamus, no matter how loud, could be heard across the entire length of Egypt. But the message was not literal. It was a mythological threat. The hippopotamus, as we know, is the sacred animal of Seth. By complaining about the noise of the hippos in Thebes, the Hyksos king was saying, "Your culture, your very existence, offends my god. My god, Seth, is the master of the hippopotamus. Submit to him or be destroyed." Sekenenra Tau understood the code. He went to war. He died terribly. His mummy was found with massive axe wounds to the skull, likely inflicted by a Hyksos battle axe. He was a martyr for Amun. His sons, Kamose and Amos, continued the fight. They eventually drove the Hyksos out. They stormed Avaris. They burned the palaces. They reunited Egypt and founded the new kingdom. You would think, then, that Seth would be disgraced. You would think that, as the god of the defeated enemy, his temples would be razed and his name erased. But Seth is a survivor. He is the separator. He cannot be removed from the cosmos. The victorious pharaohs of the 18th dynasty were pragmatic. They recognized that while the Hyksos were enemies, their weapons, the chariot and the composite bow, were useful. And the god of those weapons was useful too. Seth retreated to the margins again, but he did not disappear. He remained the god of the eastern delta, the god of the frontier. The army respected him. Soldiers engraved his name on their shields. "Sutek, give me strength," they whispered before battle. And then, something extraordinary happened. At the end of the 18th dynasty, the royal line of Thutmoses and Akhenaten withered away. There was no heir. The throne passed to a general. a military man from the Delta, a man whose family came from the very region where the Hyksos had once ruled. His name was Paramesu. He became Ramses I. He founded the 19th dynasty. And his son was named Seti, the man of Seth. For a pharaoh to take the name of the murderer of Osiris was a radical theological statement. It was like a medieval Christian king naming himself Judas or Lucifer. But Seti I was not ashamed. He was a warrior. He was bringing the Sethian energy back to the throne to restore the empire's glory after the chaotic Amarna period. Seti I was a great builder and a great conqueror, but his devotion to the Red God is best preserved in a remarkable monument known as the 400-year Stela. Found in the ruins of Tanis, near Old Avaris, this granite slab is a time machine. It was commissioned by Ramses II, but it commemorates an event from the reign of his father, Seti. It marks the 400th anniversary of the rule of Seth in the Delta. The text is fascinating. It does not treat Seth as a monster. It addresses him as the father of the fathers, the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, and the great of strength. It portrays Seti the first offering wine to Seth. Seth is depicted in his Asiatic form, tasseled kilt, conical helmet with bull horns, holding the Ankh, life, and the Was scepter, power. This stela tells us that the Ramesside kings considered Seth to be their divine ancestor. They believed their dynasty was founded not by Horus, but by Seth. They were the Sethian line. They were the storm that had come to save Egypt. But the zenith of Seth's power came with Seti's son, the man who would become the face of Egypt for all eternity, Ramses II, Ramses the Great. Ramses was a master of propaganda, but he was also a believer. He had red hair. Scientific analysis of the roots of his hair from his mummy has shown that he was naturally a redhead in his youth, though he dyed it with henna in his old age. In ancient Egypt, red hair was the mark of Seth. Ramses wore it as a crown of fire. In the 5th year of his reign, Ramses marched north to face the Hittite Empire. The destination was the city of Kadesh, in modern-day Syria. It was meant to be a swift victory. Ramses led 4 divisions of the army. He named them after the greatest gods: the division of Amun, the division of Ra, the division of Ptah, and the division of Sutek, Seth. But Ramses was young and rash. He was tricked by Hittite spies. He led the division of Amun far ahead of the rest of the army, camping outside Kadesh, believing the enemy was days away. He was wrong. The entire Hittite army, thousands of chariots, was hiding behind the city mound. They attacked. They smashed into the division of Ra, which was marching to catch up. They scattered it. The Hittite chariots wheeled around and crashed into Ramses's camp. Panic ensued. The Egyptian soldiers fled. Ramses was surrounded. He was alone in his chariot, with only his shield-bearer, Mena, by his side. The enemy was closing in. 2,500 chariots against one man. In this moment of absolute terror, Ramses did not call upon Osiris, the god of the dead. He did not call upon Isis, the magician. He called upon the storm. The inscriptions of the Battle of Kadesh, which Ramses carved onto every temple wall he could find, record his prayer, and the imagery is purely Sethian. "I was like Seth in his moment," Ramses declares. "I was like Baal in his hour of wrath. He describes himself transforming. The spirit of the red god entered him. He felt the Sekhem. I charged into the midst of them, the text says. I slaughtered them in their places. I was like a griffin. I was like a storm wind. Ramses describes his arrows flying like hail. He describes the Hittites falling before him, crying out, "This is no man. This is Sutek, the great of strength. A monster is among us." Whether this is historical fact or royal propaganda, the theology is clear. In the chaos of war, the king becomes Seth. The terrifying, chaotic, violent power of the Red God is the only thing that can save the state when order collapses. Ramses survived Kadesh not because he was good, but because he was dangerous. He returned to Egypt claiming a great victory, though it was really a stalemate. And he elevated Seth to a position of honor equal to Amun. In his new capital city, Pi-Ramses, he built a massive temple to Seth. It was located in the southern district of the city, facing the Temple of Amun in the north. The capital was balanced between the Hidden One, Amun, and the Storm, Seth. Seth became the god of foreign diplomacy. When Ramses finally signed the famous peace treaty with the Hittites, the first recorded peace treaty in human history, it was ratified by the gods of both lands. The Hittites swore by Teshub, their storm god. The Egyptians swore by Seth. On the silver tablet of the treaty, it is written, "Witnessed by Seth, the ruler of the sky." Seth was the bridge. He was the only Egyptian god who could speak to the foreign gods because he was like them. He was the translator of divinity. He allowed Egypt to engage with the world not just as a conqueror, but as a peer. During the Ramesside period, Seth was everywhere. We find small stelae dedicated to him by common soldiers. We find scarabs with his image, a winged Seth piercing the serpent. We find personal names like Seti, Set-Nacht, Seth-Mos. He was the good god. He was the pilot of the sky. He was the virile, sexual, aggressive patron of a confident empire. If you stood in the temple of Seth in Pi-Ramses, you would have seen a statue of the god not as a demon, but as a hero. Perhaps he was depicted spearing the serpent. Perhaps he was depicted offering life to the pharaoh. The incense smoke would be thick. The chanting would be loud. A martial, rhythmic chant, different from the soft hymns of Osiris. This was the rehabilitation of the outcast. The monster had been brought into the fold. The red hair was no longer a mark of shame. It was the color of royalty. But history, like the Nile, rises and falls. The Ramesside dynasty, for all its glory, could not last forever. The Bronze Age collapse was coming. The Sea Peoples were on the horizon. The empire would fracture. And as Egypt began to turn inward, as the confidence of the new kingdom faded into the paranoia of the third intermediate period, the people began to look for a scapegoat. They began to look for the cause of their misfortune. Why was the Nile low? Why were the foreigners invading? Why was the world falling apart? It must be the fault of the foreign god. It must be the fault of the Red One. The tide was turning. The worship of Seth, which had reached such dazzling heights under Ramses, was about to face a catastrophic collapse. The demonization was approaching. The statues that Ramses commissioned would be smashed. The name of Seti would be chiseled out of the walls. The god who had saved the sunboat would be dragged off the prow and cast into the abyss of absolute villainy. But before we witness that fall, let us pause for a moment in the golden sunset of the 19th dynasty. Let us remember Seth as the Ramessides saw him, the splendor of the army, the roar of the chariot wheels, the flash of the bronze scale armor, the god who stood at the border and said, "This land is under my protection." He was the god of kings, and for a brief, shining moment, the storm was the most beautiful thing in the sky. The statues are crumbling. The chisels are coming for the hieroglyphs. The storm is breaking apart. We have walked a path that spans millennia. We stood in the primordial silence as Seth tore his way out of the womb. We sat in the banquet hall as the coffin of Osiris was sealed. We endured the 80 years of legal bickering in the hall of the Ennead. We sailed the terrified waters of the underworld, watching Seth spear the serpent Apophis night after night. And finally, we stood in the golden light of the Ramesside era, where Seth was hailed as the god of kings, the patron of the empire, and the protector of the peace treaty. But the sun that rises must also set. And for Seth, the sunset was long, bloody, and absolute. We enter the twilight of Egyptian history. The confident empire of Ramses has crumbled. The borders have collapsed. Foreign armies, Nubians, Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, are marching into the Nile Valley, not as guests, but as conquerors. And as the Egyptian people looked for a reason for their suffering, they turned their eyes toward the god of foreigners. They turned their eyes toward the red god. This is the story of the demonization. This is the story of how a god became a monster. But it is also the story of how that monster survived in the shadows, becoming the most powerful figure in the history of magic. To understand the fall of Seth, we must feel the atmosphere of the Third Intermediate Period, circa 1069 to 664 BCE, and the Late Period, circa 664 to 332 BCE. Egypt was traumatized. The glorious isolation of the Old Kingdom was gone forever. The land was being humiliated by wave after wave of invaders. In the Ramesside era, foreigners were people to be conquered or traded with. Seth, the god of foreign lands, was the ambassador. But in the Late Period, foreigners were oppressors. They burned temples. They taxed the people. They defiled the Ma'at. The logic of the priesthood began to shift. If foreigners are evil, and Seth is the god of foreigners, then Seth must be evil. He was no longer the necessary chaos that kept the world turning. He became the enemy within. He became the scapegoat for a civilization in decline. The first signs were subtle. In the temples of Osiris and Horus, the rituals changed. The priests began to emphasize the suffering of Osiris. The murder was retold not as a tragedy, but as a crime that demanded eternal vengeance. The passion plays of Abydos became more violent in their depiction of Seth. Then came the Nubian pharaohs of the 25th dynasty. They were devout worshippers of Amun, the Hidden One. To them, Seth was the god of the northerners, the god of the Hyksos, the god of the chaos that they had come to quell. They looked at the statues of Seth with suspicion. But the real break came with the Assyrian invasion. The Assyrians were brutal. They sacked Thebes. They stole the sacred treasures. The Egyptians were devastated. The Assyrians came from the east, Seth's domain. The reaction was a national purge. The proscription of Seth began. Imagine the sound of chisels ringing out across Egypt. It was a sound of erasing history. Priests and stonemasons climbed ladders in the great temples of Karnak and Luxor. They found the image of the Seth animal, that strange, curved snout beast, and they hacked it out. They did not just remove it, they killed the image. They slashed the neck of the carving. They gouged out the eyes. In the Book of the Dead papyri from this period, the name of Seth is often written with the determinative sign for demon or enemy. Sometimes it is written in red ink, a color now associated purely with danger and bad luck. The city of Edfu became the center of this anti-Seth movement. Edfu is the city of Horus. The priests there developed a theology that was entirely based on the hunting and destruction of Seth. They celebrated the Festival of Victory. It was a ritual of elaborate cruelty. The priests would mold figures of hippopotamuses and crocodiles out of red wax or dough. These cakes represented Seth and his confederates. They would write the name of the enemy on them. Then, in a solemn procession, the king or the high priest would take a harpoon and stab the cakes. They would cut them into pieces. They would throw them into braziers to be burned. As the smoke rose, the people would chant curses. "Fall, O roarer! You are non-existent. Your name is wiped from the sky. Horus has taken your testicles. The fire consumes your bones." It was a ritual execution, performed year after year. The slayer of Apophis had become Apophis. The hero of the boat was now the monster in the water. But the most damaging blow to Seth's reputation did not come from the Egyptians themselves. It came from the Greeks. When Greek travelers, historians, and eventually conquerors, the Ptolemies, arrived in Egypt, they tried to understand the complex animal-headed gods by matching them with their own pantheon. This is called interpretatio Graeca. They looked at Thoth and saw Hermes. They looked at Horus and saw Apollo. They looked at Hathor and saw Aphrodite. And then they looked at Seth. They saw a god of storms, violence, scorching heat, and monsters. They did not see the nuance of necessary chaos. They did not understand the concept of the solar defender. They saw only destruction. They identified Seth with Typhon. In Greek mythology, Typhon is the ultimate monster. He is not a god. He is a beast born of Gaia and Tartarus to destroy Olympus. He has 100 dragon heads. He breathes fire. He is the enemy of Zeus. By conflating Seth with Typhon, the Greeks stripped him of his divinity. Seth ceased to be a lord of the Ennead. He became a titan of pure evil. The Greek writer Plutarch, in his famous work De Iside et Osiride, cemented this view for the Western world. He described Seth/Typhon as the principle of drought, the sea that swallows the Nile, the burning wind that kills the crops. He described him as red-skinned and donkey-like. The donkey, once a noble animal of the caravan in the desert, became a symbol of stupidity and lust. People with red hair were mocked and, according to some grim rumors, though likely exaggerated, were sometimes sacrificed or abused in rituals during this dark period. The temples of Seth were abandoned. His priesthood disbanded. The great city of Ombos fell into ruin. The worship of the red god was officially dead. But you cannot kill a god. You can only force him underground. As the official state religion turned its back on Seth, the people on the margins, the magicians, the sorcerers, the desperate, embraced him. We find the evidence in the Greek magical papyri, PGM. These are spell books collected from the Greco-Roman period of Egypt. They are a chaotic mix of Egyptian, Greek, Jewish, and Coptic magic. They are the textbooks of the street wizards. In these spells, Seth is not dead. He is vibrant. He is terrifyingly powerful. Why would a magician invoke a demon? Because demons get things done. Osiris is too distant. Horus is too righteous. But Seth? Seth breaks rules. If you want to curse a thief, if you want to force someone to love you, if you want to bind a spirit, you call the god who bound the serpent. He is invoked as Typhon Seth, the headless one, or the god of the red ass. Listen to the language of a binding spell from the PGM, PGM 7. I invoke thee, who art in the empty wind, terrible, invisible, all-powerful God of gods, thou maker of destruction and maker of desolation, thou who dwellest in a tomb, thou who art born in the desert, I invoke thee, Seth. Cast thy fury upon my enemy. He became the patron of erotic magic. Remember the myth of the lettuce and the testicles? In the logic of magic, Seth's hypersexuality, even though it was chaotic, was a source of raw power. Spells for attraction often invoked the heat of Seth to burn in the heart of the beloved. He also became a protector against nightmares. Paradoxically, the god who is now called a demon was the best defense against other demons. The papyri contain spells where the magician identifies himself as Seth to scare away ghosts. Stand back, I am the red one. I am the one who tore the eye. This underground survival is fascinating. It shows that the common people understood something the high priests tried to forget. You need the monster on your side. When you are walking through a dark alley in Alexandria, you don't pray to the harp-playing gods. You pray to the one with the iron knife. There is one final, strange mythological twist from this late period that we must cover. It comes from the papyrus Jumelhak. This text preserves a localized myth where the tables are completely turned on Seth. In the old days, Seth hunted Osiris. In this late myth, Anubis hunts Seth. The story tells that Seth, in the form of a panther or a leopard, attacked the body of Osiris. Anubis, the jackal guardian, chased him. Anubis caught the great strength. He did not just kill him, he flayed him. He skinned the red god alive. Anubis then branded the skin with hot iron to leave the marks of burning. This, the myth explains, is why leopards have spots. And it is why the Sem priests, the funeral priests, wear leopard skins. When a priest wears the leopard skin, he is wearing the trophy of Seth's defeat. He is wearing the chaos that has been mastered. It is a gruesome image. The god who once stood at the prow of the sun boat is now reduced to a pelt worn by a mortuary priest. It seems like the ultimate humiliation. And yet, look closer at the symbolism. The priest needs the skin to perform the magic. The magic of resurrection cannot happen without the power of Seth. Even in his defeat, even as a flayed skin, Seth provides the energy that fuels the ritual. He is the battery of the afterlife. This brings us to the end of the history and to the heart of the philosophy. Who is Seth? We have called him many things: the separator, the usurper, the murderer, the defender, the storm. In the modern world, we often try to categorize ancient gods as good or bad. We look at Osiris and see Jesus. We look at Seth and see Satan. But this is a mistake. It is a simplification that robs the myth of its power. Seth is essential chaos. Imagine a world without him. A world of pure Osiris is a world of pure stasis. It is a world where nothing dies, but nothing changes. It is a lush, green, suffocating silence. A world without the desert is a world without boundaries. A world without the storm is a world where the air grows stagnant and poisonous. Seth is the force that breaks the container. He is the violence of birth. He is the pain of growth. He is the friction that creates fire. He murdered Osiris, yes, but in doing so, he forced Osiris to become the lord of the dead, creating the afterlife and the hope of resurrection. Without the murder, there is no eternal life. He fought Horus, yes, but in doing so, he tested the young king, hardening him, ensuring that the ruler of Egypt was not just a rightful heir, but a warrior capable of defending the land. He fights Apophis, yes, and this is his greatest truth. He is the only one who can look into the abyss and not blink, because the abyss is reflected in his own eyes. He utilizes his darkness to protect the light. In our own lives, we all have a red land. We all have moments of anger, of jealousy, of chaotic energy. We have moments where we want to tear down the walls. We are taught to repress this, to hide the Sethian parts of our nature. But the Egyptian wisdom suggests something else. It suggests that we should not destroy the Seth within us, because we can't, and because we shouldn't. We must invite him onto the boat. We must give him a spear and a job to do. We must channel that aggression into protection, that chaos into creativity, that noise into the thunder that clears the air. Seth is the reminder that peace is not the absence of violence. It is the mastery of it. So tonight, as the wind picks up outside your window, do not be afraid. Listen to the howl. It is not the sound of a demon. It is the sound of the guardian making his rounds. It is the sound of the great of strength, the lord of the oasis, the son of Nut, standing at the prow of the universe, shouting at the darkness so that we may sleep in the light. The temples of Avaris are dust. The name of Sutek has been chiseled from the walls of Karnak. The lettuce gardens have withered, but the desert remains. The storm remains. And as long as there is a boundary between the known and the unknown, the red god will be there, patrolling the edge, his iron spear raised, waiting for the serpent to rise. Thank you for journeying with me through the sands of time, from the first sunrise to the final twilight. We have walked the path of the most complex figure in mythology, and I hope you have found a new understanding of the shadows. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the complete life of Seth, and if you found a strange comfort in the heart of the storm, please leave a like and subscribe to Hearths of Myths. May your walls be strong. May your mat be balanced. And may you always have the strength to tame the chaos in your own heart. Sleep well.